I'm Stephen Covey. I would like to make a few forwarding comments to the book, Life Matters. Profound knowledge. These are the words of the late Edwards Deming, the management quality guru who helped bring America back to economic prominence. He used this phrase, profound knowledge, to describe the deeper knowledge of human nature and principles needed to understand and make practical knowledge work. Profound knowledge is literally what this book is. In fact, what I would say is profound wisdom, because it interweaves timeless, universal, and self-evident principles into all of the knowledge that is given. The great educator, Alfred North Whitehead, differentiated knowledge from wisdom in this way. In a sense, knowledge shrinks as wisdom grows, for details are swallowed up in principles. The details of knowledge which are important will be picked up ad hoc in each avocation of life, but the habit of the active utilization of well-understood principles is the final possession of wisdom. Rebecca and Roger Merrill are not only truly marvelous people, they are a remarkable couple. As will become wonderfully obvious to you, they practice and they live what they teach. They didn't just learn these things, they earned them, often the hard way, as they clearly, humbly acknowledge. Before I share my passion for this remarkable book, I would first like to share with you my experience with both Roger and Rebecca. I believe that the more you understand them and my experiences with them, the better you will understand the material in this book. I have known Roger almost my entire adult life. We have been involved together in many enterprises and projects, and I can honestly say he is one of the finest people I have ever known. A beautiful blending of heart, mind, and spirit. I also esteem him to be one of the finest and wisest teachers I have ever seen. He has been teaching material like this in his professional work all over the world for over 35 years. And Rebecca has been an absolute godsend to me. Her faithful editing and contributions to the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, from my point of view, were absolutely indispensable to the success of that book. Her editing and writing contributions, together with her husband Roger, to our book, First Things First, were core to it becoming, to my knowledge, the best-selling, hardcover time management book ever written. Rebecca also helped enormously in editing and creatively producing the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families, which also, to my understanding, is the best-selling hardcover family book ever published. There is no one I have worked with who is more diligent, more conscientious, more second mile, or more empathic and supportive than Rebecca. You will come to feel what I am saying as you listen to her personal stories and her learnings. In short, her earnings. After working with Roger and Rebecca on the book First Things First, I learned so much about technology and tools in managing time. In fact, I've always thought of Roger as some kind of techno nut. He pays such a price in analyzing all the different alternatives before purchasing technology and tools that can optimize effectiveness and efficiency that I simply give my confidence to his conclusions. And it saves my time in the research and analysis. The way that Roger brings to Rebecca all this amazing technology has wonderfully leveraged her special gifts. You will find, as you listen to this material, the spirit of a good teacher. Because a good teacher always starts with the student's mind, their understanding, their concerns, their needs, their hopes. For instance, they softly but powerfully expose popular myths and misconceptions in order to give a platform for sharing insights. Myths that most people have unconsciously come to believe, such as balance means equalizing the scale. Faster is better. Work and family are natural enemies. The Merrills quote Oliver Wendell Holmes, who once said, "I wouldn't give a fig for the simplicity on this side of complexity, but I would give my right arm for the simplicity on the far side of complexity. When in this book you get into the four fields of work, family, time, and money, you will come to see and feel that you are truly learning the simplicity on the far side of complexity. And what they call the three got-to-dos organizes the material excellently. Another very unique contribution of this book is their insights on money and personal finance. You will see how well the principles presented in the first three sections are applied to this vital and often painful area of our lives. It will give you a great cumulative sense of confidence in the underlying principles, in yourself, and in your ability to apply the principles personally and in your family. Organizations will also find great value in teaching these principles of effectiveness to their people. Our research has shown a direct, and I feel obvious, connection between how well harmonized people's personal lives are and their effectiveness at work. Ultimately, organizational productivity comes from each individual's ability to focus on and execute around the top strategic priorities of their work group and organization. By implementing the optimizers described in Work Matters and creating this dynamic life balance that the Merrills describe, people will significantly increase their value to their organizations. I would like to offer two ideas on how to get the very most from the material offered on this CD. First, teach or share each of the 7 chapters with your loved ones, friends, or professional associates. Almost everybody knows that it is when you teach something that you really learn it. And I would do it very slowly and carefully. Second, discuss and apply the ideas step by step. Start with baby steps if you wish. I will tell you what will happen if you do these two things. You will make the positive changes in your life legitimate with others because you will be sharing what you yourself are learning. When you share with others what you are learning in the spirit of humility, they will see you in an entirely new light. This will tend to break down old labels. It will literally make change legitimate in your family and professional culture. It will also enroll those with whom you share and discuss your learnings to become part of your support team. In fact, one of the things we've learned in the field of personal change is that a nurturing support team is almost essential, particularly if you seek change that is real and sustainable. To learn and not to do is really not to learn. To know and not to do is really not to know. As you come to understand and then share this material with others, not with the intent of shaping them up, but with the intent to sincerely share what you yourself are genuinely learning, you will be on your way in all 4 of these areas, particularly if you make internal commitments and begin making the necessary changes. If by chance you fall off the wagon from time to time, re-listen to the last chapter on wisdom, and you'll get inspired by the various ideas and quotes. You might also go back to the first 2 chapters so that you have a burning sense of purpose and fire that come from understanding the why of things. Even though I have worked with the Merrills for over 20 years and have seen them in many different contexts, frankly, I was surprised and delighted with all of their new material, new insights, new learnings. Seriously, this is profound stuff. It is deep and enormously practical. The material is anything but trite, success formula blather. You will discover fresh new angles in every subject. Look for them. You will see the larger context given and the principles introduced before the practical side is approached. Illustrations are abundant. The reading flows. How many couples do you know that could synergistically produce such a magnificent book? Synergy means 1 plus 1 equals 3 or more. In other words, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. This book is a synergistic product wherein the differences between Roger and Rebecca become strengths. The fruit of their synergy will enable people in all situations and walks of life to identify with practical common sense in the 4 fields of work, family, time, and money. The significance of this approach, you might ask? Common sense is not common practice, but it could be.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Merrill.
And I'm Roger.
We'd like to welcome you to this audio production of our book, Life Matters, Creating a Dynamic Balance of Work, Family, Time, and Money. Now, rather than doing a formal presentation, we'd like to share this book with you in sort of a reader's forum. And if you have any questions or comments, you can contact us by email at lifematters@armerrill.com or log on to our website, franklincovey.com/lifematters. We'll do our best to respond. We sincerely hope this material will provide insights and tools that will help you accomplish what matters most in your life. Now let's talk about Life Matters. Chapter 1, What Matters? Roger?
So we want to start out with the question, what matters? Now, one of the profound impacts of recent events like the war on terrorism and corporate scandals that are hitting the news and the struggling stock market and 9/11 is that they bring us dramatically and undeniably face to face with some of the things that matter most in our lives. Now, for several years, I've taught corporate and public seminars on time management and life leadership. Now, nearly always, it's taken a little time up front in the program to break through people's comfort zone and to get the environment right where they're really ready to consider their lives on a deeper level. Now, sure, people were frustrated with their lack of balance. In fact, one Franklin Covey survey that we worked with of over 300,000 participants showed that the increasing pulse of life balance frustration had reached the point where it was the number one issue reported by all those participants. And sure, they were frustrated with increasing corporate demands and family disintegration, and of course nobody likes the fact that corporate success seemed to be demanding longer and longer hours of intense focus on the job. And the idea that there are social problems, like the divorce rate going up, has nearly doubled, and teen suicide has nearly tripled, and out-of-wedlock births have more than quadrupled in the last 30 years. But it was particularly moving on people when they realized that some of those statistics reflected what was going on in their own homes. Still, the overwhelming need people felt to somehow justify their self-worth through business has led to what's been called an urgency addiction, where people just are too busy to do what really matters most, at home or at work. Now, the events of the recent past have changed that mindset for many. When I approach groups now, there's a much more immediate, unified resonance with the need to focus our lives on what's important instead of just urgency. There's an increased focus on spending time with family, and there's an increased focus on improving job performance. But the burning question is how? How can I have the best of both worlds? How can I prioritize the family and also do a great job at work? And do it in the midst of the challenges that surround us.
For women, this challenge is particularly intense. The pendulum has really swung dramatically from the pre-World War II era, when women were essentially wives, mothers, and homemakers, then to the 70s, when many of them became convinced that there really was no real fulfillment except in the glittering corporate world, to the 90s, when some began to feel like they'd literally thrown the baby out with the bathwater. They tried to become superwomen and do it all. To the 21st century, when even though women have more choices than ever before, many feel successful in the workplace but inadequate as mothers, or maybe resentful of or unappreciated in their work, and may be compelled to work because of economic pressure or social expectation. How many women today really find joy in their work? How many genuinely feel good about the quantity and the quality of time they're giving to their families? How many make job choices that are not primarily economically driven? How many feel like they're making a significant contribution in the workplace or in the world? I think women have unique talents and abilities that enable us to excel both in the home and in the workplace, but our very uniqueness, including the ability to give and nurture life, provides intensified challenges when it comes to creating work-family balance. There are issues that every woman has to address, and one woman's life balance answers aren't necessarily another's.
As we've explored these intense and often poignant life balance issues over the years, it's become more and more apparent that work, family, money, and time are not simply isolated arenas in which people can make incremental improvements. They are the essential elements of a highly interrelated and complex system. And while events such as the downturn in the economy or the threat of war may cause the pendulum to swing, drawing our attention to one element or another, the bigger picture of history and our own experience affirm the truth that over time, work, family, money, and time are all important, and you simply can't sustain quality of life without reasonable success in each of these vital areas.
Now, before going further, we'd like to take you through a personal evaluation so that you can assess how you feel about each of these vital elements in your own life. In this audio presentation, we'll only take a couple of sample questions in each area. For the full questionnaire, you can log on to our website. Now, Roger's going to read one statement, and I will read another statement for each question. So what you need to decide is whether you feel like the statement that Roger reads best describes you, or the statement that I read. And of course, you may be somewhere in between, and probably are, but this will give you an idea at least of your sense of competence in these areas and of life balance as a whole. Now, if you'd like to take this evaluation online, you can go to www.franklincovey.com/lifematters. That will allow you to take it electronically and also to have it evaluated electronically.
It'll also give you some comparison, how other people come out. So as you're listening to these comments, there's actually, if you were taking it online or on the book, there'd be numbers between them, so you could give a number to it, whether it's more like what Rebecca says or more like what I say.
But if you're
driving, don't do that.
No. Okay, we'll start out with the area of work. Number 1.
I really don't like my work. Maybe my work environment, my boss, the people I work with, the lack of freedom or opportunity is terrible. I feel like my job is meaningless and boring, but I don't have the education or skill to do something I'd like better. I only work because I have to.
Or, I really love my work. I feel a sense of joy and contribution in doing it. Question 2.
If I lost my job, I have no idea what I'd do.
Or, my employability is not an issue. I have enough education and skill to get another good job should the one I currently have fall through. Let's take a look at the family. Question 1.
I know family is important, but it feels like a lot of work. There are too many demands, too many arguments, too many people to please.
Or, I love my family. I really enjoy spending time with them on a daily basis, and they enjoy spending time with me. Question 2.
I don't know how to make my family better. I feel so tired when I get home. I just want to be by myself and crash.
Or, I try to be and believe I am a good family member, husband, wife, parent. I feel joy and satisfaction in really investing in my family role. Let's move on to the area of time. Question 1.
I rarely have time to invest in personal development or building relationships. I know it's important to exercise and eat right, but I don't do it. I'm so busy it feels like there's never time.
Or, I take time on a regular basis to invest in personal development and quality relationships. I also invest time in maintaining personal well-being, so that health and energy are not limiting factors in my life. Number 2.
What are my children learning about time from living in our home? Probably that you have to spend it working like crazy, often an unpleasant task, and worrying like crazy, usually about money. And the best relief from working and worrying is to go on vacations, buy things, or watch TV.
Or, in our home, we try to maintain an environment of positive, peaceful interaction and growth. We try to teach our children the principles of time management and life leadership that will empower them to live happy, balanced lives when they're adults. Let's move on now to money. Question 1.
I don't know where the money goes. It feels like there are always unmet needs and we're always behind. The economic factor is a driving concern in our lives.
Or, I feel satisfied that we have enough money to meet our needs, and we're spending our money on what matters most. Question 2.
Finances are basically a major pain in our family. We usually don't talk about it, we argue about it, we're not in agreement on earning or spending priorities, and our spending is not coordinated.
Or, finances are one of our family's strengths. Dealing with money issues has helped us develop shared vision and values, effective systems, and character strength, communication, and trust. Now moving on to wisdom. Question number 1.
I tend to get lost in the busyness of each day. It's difficult for me to maintain an ongoing sense of purpose and direction. I don't know how to recognize the inner promptings of conscience. I often feel confused and torn.
Or, I feel a sense of overall meaning and purpose in my life, and that I live each day true to my own inner promptings. Question number 2.
I get frustrated when unexpected things come up that threaten to alter my plan for the day.
Or, I'm able to respond to unanticipated work and family needs with confidence and peace. Now, as you think about these questions that you've just gone through, hopefully this will have given you some insight into maybe which area, work, family, time or money, or wisdom, might be an area that you would want to look into for improvement. Your feeling about all of these areas together will give you a general feeling about your degree of life balance. We suggest that you retake this questionnaire periodically to kind of help index your improvement.
And because life is moving at an increasingly fast pace, the consequence of having one or more of these essential elements out of order is becoming more and more severe. If you aren't highly employable and good at your work, if you don't have the character and competence to be a good spouse, parent, son, daughter, or sibling, if you're in debt over your head and constantly pressed by economic concerns, if you're stressed and feel as if you never have enough time and the important things in your life aren't getting done, these things are going to negatively, significantly, and increasingly impact the quality of your life.
But the good news, actually the great news, is that when you do get work, family, time, and money aligned and working together, they not only provide a sense of competence and fulfillment in each of the individual areas, but they also create a powerful synergy, a driving engine that keeps you moving forward with increased energy and overall life satisfaction. They also transform daily challenges into resistance training weights that build enduring wisdom, character, and life balance capacity.
So how do you do it? How do you achieve competence in handling each of these 4 areas and also blend them into a synergistic life system that creates this capacity and positive momentum?
Well, that's really what Life Matters is all about. Together, we've enjoyed 35 years of professional and personal experience in dealing with these issues, and this has convinced us that there are 3 focused, high-leverage gotta-dos that are absolutely essential in order for any individual to create effective life balance. Now, in the next part, we'll talk about these essential gotta-dos, and then we'll use them as a framework to show you how you can create positive change in the way you deal with each of these 4 areas: work, family, time, and money. Then we'll show you how to develop the wisdom to blend these 4 life elements into an effective and satisfying whole.
As you listen, we ask you to keep in mind that you're in the driver's seat. An application that's perfect for somebody else might not be right for you. We're going to share our experience and hope it provides help and insight. But we understand and we hope you remember that you're unique. Your situation is unique. Your family, your relationships, your work, and your challenges are all unique. That's why you're the only one who can make the choices regarding how these principles will best apply in your situation.
Chapter 2, The 3 Gotta Do's.
We've spent a number of years trying to crack this life balance nut. And I don't know that we've totally got it in our own lives, but we've come to the conclusion that there are 3 things, one way or the other, no matter what approach you take, that you just got to do. And the first is to validate expectations. What do you really expect? What is life balance? What do you hope will happen? Now, there are problems with our expectations. It's often been said that frustration is a function of our expectations. And so if you expect that life is going to be smooth and easy, and someday if you're balanced, that's the way it's going to be, it's not going to happen. It's just not realistic. So part of the process is to look very carefully at what do you expect will happen, and there are 2 key elements there. One has to do with the idea of, is it in harmony with reality? Life is such that it's going to change, and it's going to vary, and it's going to have surprise, and it's going to have some pain, and it's going to have some struggle. That's the real world. And so any expectation that's out of harmony with that reality is going to eventually lead to frustration. Another aspect of reality are principles. Principles are those things that are true everywhere and every when. So for an example, if you want to develop trust in a relationship, you've got to be trustworthy. And that's just true everywhere. And so if part of your expectations have to do with developing these wonderful relationships with the people around you, so they're rich and they're warm at work or at home, and you're not willing to make whatever changes within are necessary to become a trustworthy person, that expectation will end up with frustration. It won't work because it's not in harmony with what you could call true north principles, things that are, like a polar star or something you guide by. Now, another aspect of being realistic has to do with where you are right now. For example, Jim Collins wrote a wonderful book. It's called From Good to Great, and they took a group of companies that on strict business standards went from being very good companies to outstanding in their field and stayed there for a period of time. And then they did in-depth research on these companies to try to find out, did they do anything in common that you could learn from? And one of the things they learned is that the leaders in these companies had a particular way of looking at things. And it spread throughout the company. And he told the story that he put in the book, and it was about an experience with Admiral Jim Stockdale. And Admiral Stockdale was during the Vietnam conflict, was a prisoner of war. He was the highest ranking U.S. prisoner of war in the camp, the POW camp there that became known as the Hanoi Hilton. And he was there for several years and was tortured numerous times, and a horrendous experience. Then he asked Admiral Stockdale, he said, when I read your book, he and his wife wrote a book about their experience. One chapter was what it was like to be in the POW camp, and one chapter was what it was like being back home. And he says, I read your book and I was getting depressed. He said, how did you survive, not knowing from one day to the next whether you're going to be tortured, what was going to happen? How did you even survive? And Admiral Stockdale said something to the effect of, well, I can tell you who didn't survive. Well, who didn't survive? As well as the optimist. really? The optimist? He said, yeah. He said, they will be home by Thanksgiving. And they weren't. Well, we'll be home by Christmas. And they weren't. We'll be home by the spring, by Easter. And they weren't. He says, they eventually just died of a broken heart. And he said he learned that you couldn't give up. You can't let yourself give up the hope and faith that someday you would survive and prevail. But you had to be brutally realistic with the circumstances you were in and face them. And he talked about one time he was in a lockdown situation. Nobody could talk in the compound. And I guess he was in a hot box or some kind of a situation that was extreme. And the guys in the POW camp developed a code, like a Morse code, and so they were out sweeping the compound. You couldn't talk, so they'd tap out messages to each other with their brooms. And they were tapping out messages, hang in there, Captain, or Admiral, I don't know what his rank was at the time, hang in there, we're with you. And they were communicating to each other by tapping with their brooms. They developed these little ways to survive under very difficult circumstances. Well, Jim Collins said that he learned as they went to these companies that raised their level of performance and stayed there was that attitude to be brutally realistic was a characteristic of every one of these companies. That they were very realistic in facing the situation. They didn't give up on their vision or their dream. But if they were in tough market position, if their plans were old, if they weren't going to do it, they had to make the hard decisions. Now, that really works with this idea of validating expectations. You have to be able to look at your circumstance now. If you're hopelessly in debt, you got to say, "Look at us. we're in debt. We're up to our ears. We don't have good habits. If somebody gave us money, realistically, within a matter of months, we'd probably be back where we are now because of the habits we have." And if you're not willing to face that, it's not going to happen.
And that's so important, with the idea that expectations have to be both real, they have to be based on principles, and they also have to be realistic. You've talked a lot about, Roger, about the being realistic, but they also have to be real. It's easy sometimes to believe some popular fad or some current philosophy that may promise life satisfaction based on certain things, but unless those things are true, unless they're based on principles, then they're not going to bring that satisfaction. The way you see things determines what you do, and then what you do determines the results that you get. So the place to start, if you want to really create change in your life, is how you see things.
Oh, that reminds me of the story about the lady over at the London Heathrow Airport. This was told to me by a colleague. We actually later found a version, what appeared to be a version of this story in a Reader's Digest, but the sister of a work colleague of mine, she was traveling and she had to stop between flights at the Heathrow Airport in London, and she was a fan of the little shortbread cookies, and so she went to the Sky Shop. They're located throughout the airport, and she went and picked out a package of the shortbread cookies, just a small package. There are all kinds there in boxes, tins, chocolate covered, everything. But she was a purist, so she got the little package. She went and sat down, and after a few moments, a man comes along who appears to be an okay person, and it's crowded in the airport, and there's an empty seat next to her, and he kind of nods and indicating it would be all right to sit down, and she says, nods, sure, and so he sits down. She doesn't think anything of it. Well, she doesn't think anything of it until it's time to go for her cookies, and she reaches down, she picks up her package of cookies, and she opens it, and she starts to munch. And she notices from kind of her peripheral vision that he's watching, like, her every move. And she's a little nervous because he's so focused. But she goes ahead, and then after a moment or two, without a word, he just reaches down and takes one of the cookies and starts to munch it. And she's taken back by this, but, I don't know, maybe this is what they do over here. She's into that, so she decides not to make a scene, so she goes to the next one. Well, he goes to the next one. And so they're going along now, every other cookie, never two in a row. Well, the tension's building because there's an odd number of cookies left in the package. Before she can devise a strategy, he reaches down, takes the last cookie, picks it up, breaks it in half, and offers her half. Well, she munches it, and he eats it, and then he gets up and dusts himself off and gives her a little bow and leaves. Never a word's been exchanged. Well, after a few moments, this thing's been pretty nerve-wracking, so she goes back to the Sky Shop. This time, instead of getting a package of cookies, she goes over to the chemist or the pharmacy, and and gets a package of antacid, and she, because it's stirred to 11. So she goes to the checkout and she opens her traveling bag to get the money to pay for the antacid. There in the top of her traveling bag is her unopened package of cookies. So, now let's suppose you're watching this whole scene and you didn't see the second scene in the Sky Shop, and you assume, like the way I told the story, I tried to get you to assume that they were really her cookies instead of his. And so you will get on your flight. Now, you didn't see the second scene in the Sky Shop, so you go get on your flight. Now, who comes to sit next to you on the flight? The guy, right? Now, what's going to be your attitudes and your behavior toward that guy when they bring your food tray? So you're going to have your fork pulled, ready, touch mine, turkey. But anyway, now let's suppose you'd seen the whole scene and you knew whose cookies they really were. What would be your attitudes and your behavior toward the same guy? Different? A little? A lot. See, now Rebecca was talking about this see-do-get cycle, and that's really an illustration of how you see the person, how you see the circumstance. That's why you do what you do. Sometimes people say, why'd you do that? And you go, I don't know, it just seemed like a good idea at the time. So I saw it. Well, it's actually a pretty profound answer, because we do what we do based on how we see it. And why do we see things certain way? All kinds of conditions and experiences give us a view of the world. And if you want to change behavior, you got to work more than on the behavior. You have to work at the underlying paradigm. How do you really see something if it's going to change? Now, besides being aligned, there's a word called leverage, and the principle of leverage, the classic principle, if you take a lever and you stretch it out far enough, it multiplies your capacity to do work. One ancient philosopher said, if I had a lever big enough, I could move the world. It's just that idea that you can multiply or magnify effort.
A good thing to do, no matter what expectations you're dealing with, is to think about what you can do in terms of alignment and leverage that will make a difference. Just make sure you're not wasting time or money on activities that either don't grow out of what matters most to you, or activities that don't maximize the time and the money that you invest.
So we've talked about two gotta-dos: this validate expectations first, and then to optimize your efforts. And then the third one, we call it developing navigational intelligence. Now, what is that? Well, we have to make decisions as we go through life, day in and day out. And here's a dilemma. For example, if you're on the job, and most quality work in any business or any job happens when you're really focused. All your capacity is focused to accomplish something, to write a brief, to solve a problem, to fix something. But the problem is that when you're so focused, sometimes there are things going on around you, or opportunities with a coworker, with a client, if you're working at home with a family member, that you miss. And so the problem is, do you pay attention to everything going on around you, or do you concentrate and focus on what's right in front of you? And it creates a tension kind of between the two. So in order to make judgment calls, as you're moving through the day to navigate through the waters, one of the things you have to resolve is that dilemma between being aware of what's going on here and your ability to focus.
This has really been important to me. I work at home, and so does Roger a lot of the time. And we have home offices across the hall from each other. We also have two of our children living at home, one in a nearby university, 4 married children living nearby, and 15 grandchildren. They all live within about 10 minutes of our home. I have my mom living next door. 3 of our children have significant health problems, and they sometimes require additional attention or help. So one of my biggest challenges has been balancing the need for this intense focus when I write with the flexibility of just being there for the people I love. I learned a long time ago that there are teaching moments with children that just don't ever come again. There are grandchildren whose births and special birthdays only come once. And there are special times when helping my mom or responding to a question from my college-age daughter or helping Roger with a project or just being available to 10 grandchildren really makes a difference. And I don't want to miss those opportunities. I don't want to shut the door and shut out the important people in my life. But at the same time, there's no way that I can write without times of intense focus. So I try to plan based on the importance of the projects that I'm working on and the needs of the people I love. I schedule regular writing times. I also plan special birthday sneak-outs with the grandchildren and regular dinners and family nights and other activities with the children at home, and a date with my husband once a week. And I try to call my mom or see her every day. But in the process of carrying out these plans, I find out that nearly all the time, even when I'm engaged in high-focus work, I have available sort of a subconscious background scanning capacity that can alert me to higher priority opportunities and needs that may arise. And it allows me to quickly shift focus. For example, when Roger comes in or one of the children comes into my office, I can shift quickly, or this background scanning can prompt me to prioritize a day differently than I had planned. And you know, this goes back to the idea of expectations. A lot of us expect a day to unfold just as we plan. We may do a great job planning the day, but life is just unpredictable. We just have no way of knowing what's going to happen, what opportunities will come up that may really be more important than what we've planned, or what temptations might come up to pull us away. Something might be on sale all of a sudden. We find out about that, or suddenly it seems more comfortable to go do something that wasn't on the plan. These things come up, and so we need to learn to manage those expectations and anticipate change and learn how to handle it. So this background scanning or navigational capacity really is helpful in that area. And this is something that's been hard for me to do. I'm a very singularly focused person, which helps me to write, but I'm one of those people who has trouble trying to cook and talk to somebody at the same time. And so that's hard for me, but it's not nearly as hard as struggling with the discomfort that comes from feeling like you may be missing some important things that you may later regret. So I think as long as overall values are in place and those scanning sensors are on, it's a lot easier to respond effectively in the moment.
Now this is something we find that you develop. It doesn't take much bandwidth when it's on automatic, but you have to calibrate it. Now, an example of that is I was with our youngest son. We were on a fishing trip in Alaska, and we were on a small fishing boat, and we kept going out in the bay, out in the ocean. We kept going to where you couldn't see land anywhere. And the captain, it was interesting, he had all kinds of electronics in his little boat, all kinds of antennas, and you could hear little beeps and buzzes going on all the time. And he was out there fishing with us. And I didn't really pick it up, but one of the beeps and buzzes did something differently. And that alerted him, and so he put down his rod, went in and started checking more closely some of the instruments, and it turns out that there was a little weather front coming toward us. And so he picked that up because he was calibrated, so he had tuned to listen to the beeps, and he knew this was a little warning. And after studying it out, he concluded it probably wouldn't be that bad and we'd stay. And so we stayed, and it got rough for a while, and then it calmed and we went through it. But in those waters, you have to really pay attention to that. In a small boat out there, if you don't, you can be in serious trouble in very few minutes. And so all these electronic devices have really been helpful, but there's no substitute for the experience of that captain. And I was just interested to note how he just had calibrated his listening to where he could just pick up when there was something to pay attention to. And that is the way it kind of can work, that we can focus and then we keep a certain background awareness going on so we know when to pay attention to something. And this is a big issue on the job because there's so much going on around us. In fact, it's one of the big reasons why in an organization you want to develop trust and not play political games, because as a consultant I find out you go into some organizations and there's so much politicking, so to speak, going on that people feel to survive, they've got to keep their radar on all the time to kind of know when to duck, when the missiles are coming in, so to speak. And they're so focused on surviving with the political environment that what suffers is focus. And so people just don't get stuff done. And so there are some things you can do to deal with the politics, but what we can do as an individual is learn to simply not play the games and to focus when we can, but then to keep this background scanning going on, and when something really important comes along, to try to learn to be sensitive enough to pay attention to it, so we're not just oblivious and kind of rude and causing part of the problems without meaning to. But there's a delicate balance in it. Just like this captain, you can get all the training, but there's certain things you only learn by experience and by a few rough seas. And it is something you develop, this navigational intelligence.
And there are some important things you can do to develop that. The first one is to value principles, to really appreciate and determine to live by those things that will bring the results that you want to get in life. As you value principles and you learn about them, you study them, then they become a part of your navigational intelligence. So when you're faced with an issue, you automatically go to those solid, dependable things in life that you know will bring quality results. And one way to help calibrate your navigational intelligence is to create a personal mission statement. Now, that's something we've taught for years and written about. It's basically a statement of what you want to do and to be in life and the values and principles upon which that doing and being are based. So if you have a personal mission statement in place, then when opportunities or challenges come up, you have that inner radar calibrated to that personal mission statement and to that area in your life that you've come to grips with that defines really the important things to you and identifies those principles that you want to live your life by.
I can give you an example of that. For instance, if through your own deep thinking and awareness, you are convinced, for example, that there are principles associated with the idea of kindness, and in your mind and in your heart, you're convinced that to be kind is the better alternative, even in very trying circumstances. You've decided that. That's a value to you. And it's in your mission statement or your credo or whatever you call it in the UK. I'm going to be kind. My goal is to be a kind person. And so you're in a situation, say at work, where somebody really comes unglued and they're in your face and they're being rude and they're accusing you, and that happens. But in you, you've determined that you will be kind. Now, one of the things that, if you value that, it just removes some of the options. You don't have to worry how you're going to slam them. That's not an option for you. Your focus and your energy is on how can I respond with integrity. We're not suggesting most people wouldn't really believe in being a wimp, but you're going to do what you do with kindness. And if you value that and keep working toward it, it builds that capacity within you, and it becomes a navigational point that you're going to guide by.
Another thing that you can do is evaluate experience. I had a good friend who recently shared with me her experience as a first-year public school teacher. She had just received her degree and she was really anxious to do well, and she was worried about her lack of experience. So she was talking with her father, who was a high school principal, and she was expressing her awe about a teacher in his school who had taught for 35 years. She said, "Oh, it must be just wonderful to have 35 years of experience." And her father thought for a moment, and then he said, there's a difference between 35 years of experience and 1 year of experience 35 times. Seems like sometimes we go through life and we make the same dumb mistakes over and over, and we just never really learn. Experience is supposed to be a great teacher, but because we don't take time to really evaluate our experience honestly and course correct, then we just don't learn from it. And again, we go back to validating expectations. We somehow think that success means not making mistakes. And so we see our mistakes as failures, and they make us feel disillusioned and tired. And so we fail to tap into the power of our mistakes as high-leverage feedback and course correction tools. I love what Charles Garfield said in his book, Peak Performers. He talked about a study that was conducted by Warren Bennis of 90 leaders in business, politics, sports, and arts. And he said that with their attention on achieving their mission, the word failure seldom enters a conversation unless someone else brings it in. The scores of synonyms for it, glitch, bug, hitch, miss, bungle, false start, to name just a few, convey their view that what someone else might call a failure is something from which they intend to learn. As one of them said, a mistake is simply another way of doing things. Just think about how different our lives would be if we realized we are going to make mistakes. We're going to make dumb mistakes. But if we can evaluate our experience and learn from those mistakes, then we will really be learning from our experience.
If you've ever been in a little boat and gone across a fairly large body of open water with waves and currents, it's an example, because what happens is you keep your eye on the pier where you're going, but you're all the time making these little course corrections. And to think that you're going to take a mechanical straight line through the currents of life is just not realistic. And so it's a process of course correction. We can't overemphasize this point, because how many times in our own life, and how many people do you know, just are afraid to try or to step out or do things because of the fear of failure? It's like, something goes wrong and they're devastated. It's, I blew it again, I'm no good. And you see, that's a big difference. If failure is a process of learning, you see it differently. Then you have the ability to navigate and to course correct. But if every time something doesn't go just right, it's a personal slam and it's a terrible, discouraging thing and life is over and it can't happen, it becomes a much bigger barrier to achievement, to accomplishment. Balance is a moving, challenging goal. And if we're afraid to try things because we're afraid of failure, we won't learn. It's a process of learning. It's literally a different way of seeing. And that paradigm is a critical one in order to develop this navigational intelligence.
And then finally, a third way to calibrate this navigational intelligence is to invite inspiration. Beyond what we can learn about principles and from our own experience is a quiet but powerful insight that gives specific personal direction and highlights what we need to work on or respond to at any given time. If you've ever been on a personal retreat, or if you've gone through the process of writing a personal mission statement, or if you've taken a few quiet moments to reflect before you set a goal, then you've probably felt this kind of inspiration. And if you've learned to pay attention to it on a regular basis, you've probably found yourself doing things that bring a great deal of satisfaction in your life. John Greenleaf Whittier wrote, "He is wisest who only gives, true to himself, the best he can, who, drifting on the winds of praise, the inward monitor obeys, and with the boldness that confuses fear, takes in the crowded sail, and lets his conscience steer." We have a friend who really has a good grasp on what's important in life, and he plans and executes and accomplishes a lot. But a real key to his inner peace and life satisfaction is symbolized by a little notebook that he keeps with him at all times. He's just constantly on the alert for inspiration. And when he receives an impression, he immediately writes it down. And he holds himself accountable to follow through with whatever it was he felt impressed to do. So one by one, as he receives these little impressions and then he carries them out, he adds to his store of personal strength and confidence in his ability to recognize and respond to the whisperings of his conscience. Now, as we go through the rest of this audio program, we're going to be looking at work, family, time, and money, and we're going to be identifying principles in each of these four areas with the goal of helping you to build this discernment capacity, this navigational intelligence. And we'll also focus on wisdom, on evaluating experience and course correcting and inviting inspiration on a deeper level.
This inspiration is sometimes just referred to as you just feel it in your gut. It's getting something to the gut level. So it's the best within you as well as the best of your experience and the best of your learning. And if you leave that out, it just becomes a very incomplete package. Now, if you look back, we suggested these three gotta-dos: validate, experience, optimize your efforts, and develop navigational intelligence. You could ask the question, so what if we don't do those? And it's a way to help clarify. If I spend a lot of effort and energy trying to achieve the goals and the objectives of life balance, and I haven't really validated my expectations, haven't dealt with what's both real and realistic, it's just going to lead to frustration and disappointment. It's something you got to do to make sure things are lined up. And then the next step is that you can get them lined up and you're working on the right things and you feel they're aligned, but you're just doing it in such an ineffective, inefficient way that you just don't have time to get there. There's too many things in life. It isn't going to happen. And so optimizing efforts, it seems that it's just another got to do. And then you're on path and you're working smart, but there's storms and there are challenges. And one thing about life you can say absolutely for sure is you can't say things for sure. It's unpredictable. It's going to change. You can depend on the unexpected. And so the navigational intelligence is fundamental in to be able to stay on course. Without it, a storm's going to come along. You're going to find yourself waking up on the wrong shore.
So basically, what we're talking about is the three gotta-dos: validate, optimize, navigate. Now we're going to use these three gotta-dos as a framework to look specifically at work, family, time, and money. We'll be exploring ways we think about these arenas of life to align our expectations with what's real and realistic, to identify high-leverage optimizers that will increase our effectiveness in each of these areas and enhance the synergy between the four. And then when we talk about wisdom, we'll look even deeper into creating synergy and positive momentum in our lives, and also into increasing our navigational intelligence and our ability to make good choices every day.